Yeah,
Yeah.
I like your story. You're very active. There's a lot going on, so I'm looking forward to getting into it. And before we do that, I want to know first and foremost, 4 years ago we were trying to figure out this pandemic, how we're going to get out of it, how it's going to affect us. At this point, how did you, when you look back, how did you get through that time period, and how did it change the way that you do things now?
That was actually a very interesting time because I just got married. We ended up getting into a house. I sold my house, got into our house that my wife built for us, had our dog that we got like February 2020 or
Wow.
2020. Yeah, I was about to say 2024, but 2020. And so I'm like trying to navigate all sorts of change. And at that time, actually, I had just gotten a new job in December of 2019. My wife, I think it was June of 2019, prior to us getting married. She got that. We got married in November 2019. So we had a ton of changes kind of happening. So I guess change was already kind of there,
Yeah.
but then being online a lot, I feel like a lot of things didn't change necessarily, but I did the biggest thing that changed for me is, and what I started doing more of was speaking about me and what I stood for more. And no matter what side that you're on, like I just kind of felt like that was kind of what was missing. Like people just kind of weren't standing up for what they believed in. They kind of just were going with the masses. And I still think there's a lot of that. But that's kind of what I really kind of started changing and doing things different about my life and business and everything.
So let's get into exactly what you do on a daily basis right now. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders at career day, and one of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How would you explain it?
I help people speak better.
Okay.
So I help people take concepts that are in their mind and be able to transfer that out to other people because we all have that where what's on our mind, what we think we understand, and we talk to somebody else and they don't quite get it or they're not quite as excited about it as us. And it's because we haven't painted that picture for them or we haven't given them enough information that they can understand that. And since we're talking to third graders, it's probably they come from home from school, something super exciting happened to them, and they start to tell their parents, and their parents just have this like glazed look over their face, like, what are you talking about? And
Yeah.
they're not excited with them.
Right.
And that's because you didn't give any context. You just said, this is the thing.
Yeah.
And being an engineer and everything, that's what we tend to do as well. We're very technical, very in the weeds. And so we want to talk technically and give all, sometimes we go too much details, but then it's overbearing with details. And now people are just lost again. So we kind of have these two extremes, people that are like super in the weeds. And so they'll go super technical. And then we got people that just don't give enough context to the information. They speak based on where they're at. And so I help people be able to understand who they're speaking to so then they can not only share the message that they're trying to share, but then they can make sure that they're sharing it so then people can actually understand it and
Yeah.
then they can get the desired outcome from that. Whether, and when we think about from stages, buying my product, doing working with me business wise, things of that, but also being able to educate them on the thing that we're trying to educate them on. So that's what I do. I know I kind of got off the third grader side,
No, no, no. You're
but
good.
that's what I do.
Yeah, no, I like it, and it's kind of reminds me of that exercise that kids would do where one kid tells a kid something like the sky is blue, and by the time they get to the end of the line, they say that the giraffe ran around in a blue pool under a red sky. Like everything gets misinterpreted. Somewhere along the way, there's always extra words and animals and interpretations, so it's very necessary. So
Yeah.
when you were in that position in the third grade, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I think it was a baseball player. I really
Okay.
can't remember, but it probably a stereotypical baseball player, but definitely not anything public speaking or engineering, anything like that. I thought it would be something to do with sports.
So take me back to where you were born and raised. How did these seeds get in you to get into engineering, to help people get and be better speakers and communicate more effectively? How did all of that get harvested and grow into who you are today?
I was a super shy and introverted kid. I grew up outside of the Houston area. So just like you mentioned about Kansas City,
Yeah.
and you weren't really actually from there, same thing for me, about an hour outside of that. And if you know anything about Texas, it's massive. Houston's massive itself. But I was out in the country and kind of grew up as a shy, introverted kid. And I graduated from high school in 2009. And you mentioned about COVID. for me, that's what decided to make me go for an engineering degree because of the recession happening in '08 and '09. So I decided, you know what, engineering would be a good route. I like math and decided to go pursue that. And that's really kind of where that started. But then I started wanting to get into fitness, or I got into fitness, and then I was on my fourth of fifth 5 years of school when I was like, you know what, I really like this fitness thing. Maybe I want to be a fitness trainer, and I really pushed that off. And then it kind of just kept eating at me. And all my family's been entrepreneurs all their lives. And it was like, man, I really want to do something that's not just engineering. I can communicate with computers and robots, but I really want to do something else. And so I started doing the fitness coaching. Found out that I loved it for myself. I didn't love it for helping other people. So I started looking into leadership coaching. And actually, while I was at BMW Manufacturing, I had an opportunity to go into the HR training department, and that's where they stuck me in with professional development skills. And the thing that they had me do was actually presentation skills. And that's where that light bulb clicked for me. I saw going to business conferences, doing self development, myself getting better at public speaking and learning how to speak up for myself because I was a young, dumb engineer according to some of the senior engineers, even though I was the one doing all the work. It was kind of crazy, but I kept getting belittled and I got tired of that. And so I started speaking up for myself. I started going to these business conferences and seeing these speakers on stage and the impact that they were creating. And I wanted to create that impact. And then it kind of got solidified that this is the direction I should go when I was in that role at BMW doing the presentation skills. Because if a big company like that sees that need, there's got to be a need in the market as well. And so that was the ultimate catalyst for me to get into that. I've done Toastmasters. I've had a couple different podcasts have kind of rebranded over the years. It started out as fitness, now it's communication podcast around public speaking and communication. But I've been doing podcasting for about 5 years and now getting on interviews and on awesome podcasts like yours and everything. And through that, all those things kind of combined is where this business really started for me to help people with their speaking skills.
What's the best speech you've ever seen?
The best speech I've ever seen. The one I can think about, which really changed my thoughts on how the speaking business works, is when I saw Jesse Itzler for the second time. And
Yeah.
really, I had seen Ed Milet, I think actually at that second event or that event where I saw Jesse Itzler the second time, I saw Ed Milet for the second time, and they said the exact same speech. Now, Ed kept it pretty close to the same thing. I liked how Jesse would throw in a couple of different stories here and there. And now they're on a totally different playing field. They are there to put butts in seats. They're not there to necessarily educate directly like some of the speakers that aren't the big celebrities like that. But what I realized was they didn't come up with a new speech every single time they spoke on stage. And I thought that's what you had to do. You had to come up with something new every single time you spoke in front of a group. No, it was about having the same message and saying that time and time again. So I would say that was kind of that second time I heard that same speech that it really hit me about what speaking actually was about. And it's not about, well, yes, you can come on different podcasts and stuff like that and speak about things a little bit differently, but your core message needs to be the same thing for people to recognize you for that and to actually learn from you and everything. So that was probably the most uh, pivotal speech that I've heard, and one, and I really liked it as well. I
Yeah.
resonated with his message also.
So, in your life, who's been that inspiration, that hero for you?
I would honestly, it's me. At the end of the day, I've always wanted to be somebody that others could look up to, others can be inspired towards. And before I had a family, I wanted to be that husband and that father that my wife and kids could look at and inspire to be like, especially my kids. I wanted my kids to be like, man, dad went after everything he wanted. He tried at least. If he didn't succeed, at least he tried it and didn't just hold back and say, well, you know what? I don't really know anything about that. So it's always been that kind of future version of myself, which ironically, Ed Milet talks about this at the end of your life when you go to heaven and there's this version of you that did everything that you possibly could have done, and the version of you that you are, that you've been kind of progressively being, are you going to be able to recognize each other? And that's what I wanted to do. I was always kind of look at the future. Who am I going to be in the future? And what do I need to get there? And so I've always kind of been my own inspiration because I realized I'm not where I want to be yet. And I want to be able to be that example, especially for my kids. And now I've got two beautiful little girls that I can be that inspiration for, but I just continue to push myself forward because of that.
So, what is that ultimate inspiration every day for you to do this work? And not only the work and to do it the best you can to help people and transform their lives, but to also evolve and grow as a human being. What is that for you?
It's to be able to change the world. And I don't necessarily have it down to a specific thing right now. It's on helping people be able to communicate better, to be better leaders, be better fathers and husbands. I think in the future it's going to change a little bit. Just like I talked about, I was into fitness coaching at first, and then I switched to public speaking coaching. I think that's going to evolve over time as I start to do more things. But right now, it's all around helping men, fathers, husbands be able to communicate better because I've seen how that's changed my life and how my relationship has with my wife has deepened and grown, and the responsibility I have, especially to my two little girls. And so I want to help others be able to see that. And it doesn't necessarily have to be men, because as far as the communication goes, I know how that's impacted my life, people speaking into my life in the way that I've been able to get better at speaking. And I want other people to have that because I don't want them to feel powerless like I did before I got into speaking. Again, going back to being that young, dumb engineer, which is ironic because if you're an engineer, you're not dumb,
No.
but I was still called young and dumb and looked down upon because I didn't have a voice for myself. I wasn't courageous enough and brave enough to speak up for myself when somebody talked down to me like that and how powerless I felt. I want others to not have to feel that way. And so that's kind of that driving force for me to continue to push forward.
What's the best advice you've ever gotten?
The best advice was actually from a manager, which was not a great one, but he said, and this was back in my programming days, and he said, no matter what, don't let the client know you don't know what you're talking about. And it's not to lie
Yeah.
about that, hey, you don't know what you're doing or you don't know what you're talking about. But it was about the fact that you need to come in with confidence. Because as soon as the client loses confidence with you, and this is part of what he said too, as soon as the client loses confidence with you, they'll never trust you again.
Yeah.
And man, that was a reality check because I never really thought about that. And
Yeah.
this was actually my first manager, my first job after graduating from engineering school and everything, for him to say that. And it stuck with me to this day. So that was roughly 2014, so a decade later. And I still talk about that, about keeping that confidence. And that goes into really every area of our life. If we are not confident in ourselves, people are not going to believe in us.
Yeah.
So we have to have self confidence in ourselves, in the thing that we are talking about, trying to present the product, whatever we're selling, presenting, talking about, whatever it is. We have to have confidence in that too, or people aren't going to believe in that or us.
So, if you had a dream tonight, ran into the 18-year-old version of you, and you could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on the life you've lived, the wisdom you've gained, what advice would you give that young version of you?
Take more action. I held myself back a lot. I mean, that comes back from the speaking side. That comes back from just not even going on dates. I love my wife, but I always kind of, I mean, not always, but there's times I think about that. Like, what would have happened if I would have done this? I'm glad my life is the way it is, but it's always interesting to go back. If I would have taken action on this, if I would maybe talk to that girl, or if I would have decided when I was getting ready to graduate, and this would have been like 20, but not 18, graduate college, if I would have decided to change my degree right then and there and went down that path, what would that have been like? And so I would just go back and tell my 18-year-old self, take action on those thoughts. Don't let those thoughts be thoughts and go away. Take some action, go explore it, be curious.
So, of all of these things that you've decided to do and had the courage to become, what are you the proudest of?
Man, these are good. Yeah, that's tough to think of the proudest one. Really, I would have to say my marriage.
Yeah.
That's something that I always strive to do. but making the decision to commit to my wife is the proudest thing that I've done. And it's not easy. There's a lot of days where I'm like, man, this would be so much easier just being single. But then the other side, I'm like, I don't want to be back in the dating world. That sounds terrible as well. But anything that's been hard in my life and I've pushed through and worked through it has always turned out to be better for me. And that's how my marriage has been. So I'm thankful that I chose the wife that I chose, because there was other women that I could have chosen that weren't near as good as her, had I just decided to settle. And so I'm glad I didn't settle and that I chose her overall.
Absolutely. So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, clients, everyone around you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think I'm somebody that's goal driven, very disciplined and goal oriented. So when I get something on my mind, I'm going after it. And you can ask my wife, she'll tell you, you get something on your mind and you won't get rid of it. You'll keep doing it until you finally figure it out or realize it's not the right path to go on. But you don't let it go. And maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing, but that's me. Disciplined and goal oriented.
So if anyone out there wants to hire you, they want to learn more about what you're doing, reach out, any of the good business, where can they go?
You can go to my website at speakingsessions.com. That's where you can find my list of services. You'll be able to find my social medias on there. But if you really want to follow somewhere on social media, you can go to LinkedIn or Facebook. That's where I'm most active.
Excellent, Philip. This has been wonderful, man. Thank you. Thank you for your energy. Thank you for your story. Keep doing the great work, man.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Thank you.